TBI Butterflies, Healing Conversations.
Welcome to TBI Butterflies Healing Conversations. I'm your host, Lolly, and I got my special friend and guest, Faith, here. Faith, please say hi.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. This is a podcast for TBI survivors about TBI survivor experiences and also for caregivers, families, friends, medical professionals, and anyone impacted and touched by TBI. Please know that we are not medical professionals. We are simply survivors who have gone through an incredible journey, and that is not to dismiss our expertise by any means, because some of the greatest expertise is only gained by traveling the journey itself. So here we are to talk about emotions today, huh, Faith?
Yes.
We want to talk about emotions in several different ways. You know, when I first had my brain injuries, what ended up happening to me is that my emotions got so intense and they got so volatile, like they were, and then none of them were positive. They were only negative. Like it was like this weird distinction or disconnection is the word I'm looking for, where I actually like couldn't feel anything positive. Everything was so intense and just didn't make sense to me. What was it like for you in the beginning?
I think it was very similar. For the longest time, I didn't feel any emotion. Then I would start feeling one emotion at a time.
So you just felt apathetic?
I felt like a zombie. I literally felt like I had no feelings. I did have a little bit of issues with irritation, but I didn't really feel it. You know, it was more like a response, like a trigger response. Before I even had the time to think about how I was reacting. So I was very impulsive. But other than that, I had no emotion. It was just like this big void. And I even had relatives that commented, they're like, wow, you're not the same person. You're you're emotionless.
Yeah, we start showing up different, right? Not only just in our cognitive perceptions, and I think those are the things that people notice less. They don't notice the memory, they don't notice the cognitive issues, they don't notice the fatigue as much, especially for those who are a little bit more high functioning. It doesn't stand out as much. But I think one of the things that does really show up really quickly is the emotional dysregulation. To everybody, because if I am usually, like, for me, before brain injury, I was such a positive, upbeat person. And I just talked about this in the other episode, is that, like, I was annoyingly positive and energetic. I was a workaholic. I did so many things. I was a valet manager at a private country club with 10 employees. I was a husband and a father who was helping coach his football team. I was writing a book on kids being bullied in schools. I was running an open mic. I was planning the Phoenix Festival of the Arts. I had an abundance of energy. So in order to go from having none of that energy, and then all of a sudden, and I was super emotionally regulated, right? I taught social emotional learning in schools, which is that bullying book I was writing at the time. And so, like, I was super emotionally regulated. And so when I become dysregulated, because who I am and who I was before, it was a stark contrast from somebody that showed up, would slow down, and then would respond instead of react. Now, all of a sudden, I'm reacting in these emotions that are so goddamn intense that, I can only imagine what it's like to be on the other side of those, from the depression.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The depth of the darkness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can see you wanted to talk on that. Go ahead.
So
Throw that out.
You know what? I did a poem yesterday actually on that topic. And really, I came to feel like darkness was so comforting. And, you have the depression and you have all this going on, but because I'd wake up with such bad headaches and I couldn't be in the light and it bothered my eyes and, the stimulation. So I was really the most comfortable just lying in a complete pitch black room with nothing going on, no light, no noise, no anything. And that came to be my comfort zone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't sound very comforting.
No.
It sounds very isolating. Right. And I can imagine that you probably felt those deep emotions as well.
I didn't, it took me a while before I was even able to understand that or feel it. I just knew that that darkness, that place, that was my safe place that I had established because there was no stimulation, there was nothing going on, there was nothing that's going to put me into fight or flight mode. And I had to have therapy sessions just to be able to go out of my room and sit in my living room for a period of time. And then the next goal was to go to somebody's house. And that took months before I would even consider it. Yeah.
Yeah, the emotional piece to this, right? The emotional component to experiencing this. And this is a glimpse of the different emotions that we're going to have from our different experiences as brain injury survivors. Yes. Right? So like for me, like for you went to a safe space to kind of get away from the intensity of your emotions. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Stimulation,
right.
Emotions, like
right.
yes,
Because and so but all of it.
Yes.
And for me, it just sent me spiraling out. There was no safe space. The emotions were just there for me. I wasn't in more the apathetic space. I immediately started feeling everything so intensely that I just wanted to, like, it's like my blood would boil, my muscles would tense, and there was nothing in this that I could possibly do that would help me. And I had mental health coping positive. I taught mental health positive coping skills. Go for a walk outside, do some breath work, count your blessings. Well, how can a blessing feel like a blessing if I feel like a burden? How can a blessing feel like a blessing if I can't even see what a blessing is? Because I'm so blinded by the all consuming negativity in my life that the darkness, and we've talked about that void, and we're going to do a whole episode on that, but this darkness that we get stuck in, that is either apathy or it's intense negative emotions, but there is no positivity there. I mean, I had to listen to music that I could only connect to emotionally that was just negative. And because I needed the negative, like, it's not that I needed the negativity, it's that I needed to be able to connect. I needed the connectivity because I felt so disconnected from everything that I wasn't able to feel like I belonged here. And that made me very depressed.
It took me months, even maybe years, to get to the point where I was like that. But that was the next step because first I felt no emotion. Then I felt one emotion. And the first emotion I actually felt was love. And it was just the ability to love another person, to have that connection. Right. And I felt the emotion, but the emotion I felt was outside of myself. So it was like, now I feel this emotion. What do I do with it? How do I process it? Because it was just sitting on my chest, literally. And I had to have several therapy sessions going through that.
Because we had to relearn how to process emotion.
Yes.
We have to relearn how to identify an emotion that we're feeling.
Yes.
We have to relearn and the appropriateness of its intensity. Because the intensity is so overwhelming. You brought up earlier this concept, because we were talking before we started recording the show, is that you brought up this concept about how when you were talking to our TBI counselor, Gabby,
yes,
that she had brought up how it's like we're being born again, or like we're just being born like a baby. I'm going to let you share that analogy or that example that she shared, because I think you did such a great job.
So it's a concept that just like a baby, babies have to take more naps. They can't stay up as long. They don't process information the way that an adult does.
Right.
Because they're unable to filter all the stimulation that's coming in. And stimulation is noise, it's light, it could be the sound from a computer. There's so much coming in, and they're not able to filter out any of that. And it's just all bombarding them, and they need to nap. And you can tell, like, if you take a kid out, if you have young kids or you're around them, they get tired easy. If you take them out running and let them play, you can just see
Right.
how worn out they get.
Right. And that's such an interesting and such important concept, I think, for people to understand the different ways in which our relationships with emotions exist. Not only just for brain injury survivors, but all the different ways that we process and experience and identify emotions. We've already talked about a couple, and it's only been 10 minutes, you know? So, like, the thing is, as you're talking about this, like, overstimulation and not having a filter and the intensity of the emotions, well, in the beginning as a baby, we need appropriate emotional attunements, right? So we need our parent in the first 3 years of our life or so. I forgive me if I'm using the inappropriate duration, but it's within the first 3 years. I at least know that we develop these deep belief systems of self. It's called the baby in the bomb shelter. Really, is what taught me this through my trauma therapist, which is the identification of a narcissist being rooted in childhood attachment. And so it's understanding that we need appropriate emotional attunement. So when I'm crying, a baby cries, he kicks, he screams, he laughs. It's how we communicate, and how the parent shows up in their face
Yes.
is what the baby interprets in how to label emotions. Well, if the parent isn't helping show up with appropriate attunement, then the baby intuitively shuts down and stops looking to a real world reference point, which is the parent, to help them identify and label their emotions. In fact, these emotions have been hurtful because of the way the parent's showing up, and that sends them into what's called the self-absorbed continuum, where they start becoming more self-absorbed and they won't trust the real world reference point anymore.
Yes.
And so what we're talking about here is, let's bring this back into how with brain injury, we get this reset and we're like that baby. And we're redeveloping our cognitive abilities. We're redeveloping our emotional abilities. We're redeveloping our physical abilities. Like, literally, coordination goes off, right? Speech goes away. Emotional dysregulation and intensity and appropriateness of it. Like, even spiritually, in every aspect, we reset. And so, at least in our experiences, and I'm willing to bet so many other will show up and say, yes, me too. So what we're talking about here is that the importance of our caregivers and the people in our lives. That's the connection here, right?
Absolutely.
That just gave me chills.
Yep.
That just gave me chills, because we need them to be our real world reference point. We need them to show up with appropriate emotional attunement, and not just emotional attunement, but environmental attunement. Because I was 35 years old. Society didn't tell me and give me the permission and allow me to relearn and redevelop my cognitive abilities. No, I had to show up as the guy I just explained that I was in the past. Having 10 employees, running an open mic, planning the first ever Phoenix Festival of the Arts, right? Or actually, at this point in time, I had already done it, but still working on it, and all of the things, writing a book and running a nonprofit and doing all the things that I was doing, while I'm having to relearn myself entirely. Imagine the emotional component there. We need y'all to show up, caregivers.
Yes.
Please understand us. Please try to understand us. Please hear us when we sit here and we are expressing this very real reality in all the different ways that we're talking about how we experience and have to relearn our emotions. And even then, let me tell you what, Faith and I are not even capturing half of it.
Not at all. But I think it's very important for caregivers to be able to understand where we're coming from in the brain injury process. And it's important for caregivers to also get therapy so that they can understand brain injury, because there's a point where we're not even able to communicate what our needs are. And it takes a while to get to that point where we can have a dialogue about, this is what I'm feeling. This is how you can help me.
Well, and some caregivers never have a brain injury survivor that can articulate. They can speak. They are nonverbal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But they may throw temper tantrums and they may lash out and scream and hit and all of these things, right?
Yes.
And so, like, that's why it's really important that caregivers give themselves the permission to hurt too.
Absolutely.
The permission to grieve the death of the old us too. Because you and I had to relearn and we had to change our relationship with brain injury. We'll do a whole other episode on that. Guys, we have so many episodes and I have so many episodes for you. But, you know, I lost my train of thought. But anyways, there was another aspect that I wanted to bring up. And that is, as we're talking about brain injury and, you know, how it shows up and helping caregivers be able to understand this and really connect these dots on the importance of our real world reference points, is that there was a point in time when I actually had to accept that my emotions were not my reality.
Correct.
Because my feelings are not reality. It's my interpretation of reality. And there's a lot of different things that influence reality, right?
Absolutely.
Like trauma. Mm-hmm. That's a really big one. And like trauma from brain injury is one thing. And then trauma that gets unlocked from brain injury is another thing. So we might be feeling very intense emotions that actually aren't appropriate at all for the situation because we're misinterpreting it, because we're not processing things appropriately. And so there was a moment in my brain injury where I actually started to fabricate realities. Because it's kind of like this. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine.
Okay.
And the conversation that I was having was in the context of, if you're afraid to have a conversation with your spouse or along those lines, and you play it out in your head, you imagine it, and you just think you have this fear that they're going to reject you or deny you or say no. And so, or they're going to react in a certain way that you think and can predict from previous behaviors. So this stops you from actually going and attempting this at all. And in fact, you've played this out, you felt those emotions, and now it becomes a memory almost.
Yes.
Like as if it's happened, which is so unfair to that person. But we do this all the time, brain injury survivors or not. And so, but what I recognized is that my ex-wife wasn't a real world reference point in so many ways, especially in trauma response. So like her trauma started to become my realities. But in the emotional aspect, like, it's just, what was I saying? Damn it, I lost it. Okay, this is part of brain injury.
Absolutely.
We get to lose our thoughts. This is also part of having compassion and grace for ourselves.
Yes.
When we do lose our thoughts and our memory goes out, and this is how we show the example of the work, is, but I know I was talking about, how I was fabricating realities and that my emotions were not always real. And there was a moment for myself where I had to be honest, that because I would literally tell her, no, I have a memory of this. Like, you can't tell me that this did. And she's like, no, Jason, this didn't happen. You never said that. And for the longest time, I thought she was actively manipulating me.
And I think another easy way to think about that too is how we create our own reality. Are like small, simple things that happen every day. Like how we know we put our keys here. I know I put my keys here. Why are they not here?
Yeah.
And in my mind, I remember putting my keys there,
Right.
but actually they're somewhere else completely. So I mean, and that's just like little things like to relate to everybody,
Right.
and how we view things.
Well, and how reality is subjective.
Yes, very subjective.
Right? Like really. And so and even more so the importance of understanding that our reality as brain injury survivors is in question inside of our identity. Like hear that, people. We literally do not know who we are anymore on the most basic fundamental level of identity. I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't know who I am either. No, this is different. This is the basic functioning identity. Everyone else wakes up and they know their baseline of emotional regulation. They know the baseline of emotions that they will feel. They know the um the tape and how it plays out in their head and the conversations that there is a baseline routine there. As a brain injury survivor, we don't have it. Every moment can shift for us. It's like being tossed around in the waves. So like emotions there, right? Like they're gonna come up, like because we're being tossed in the waves. We're tired. We're getting beat up. And then the rage. The rage is a big part of it. That's why I talk so much about being able to understand that the rage is a symptom and not our character, first of all. I also do want to mention that no, my ex-wife was not manipulating me. We need to make that clear. But you know, like I lost my train of thought because I needed to say that. Remember what I was saying? No, you lost it too. And this is what happens when two brain injury survivors have a conversation. So I was talking about the. You know, I can pause this for a second. Okay, I picked it up. So basically, like the rage being tossed in the seas, right? How the emotions, and we're tired. We're so tired. And we're just getting beat up all the time. And that's why it's so important that we really do, when we can get to the more high functional aspects, that we can do more cognitive work. I think it's very important to talk about the permission for other survivors there as well, right?
Yes.
Is not everybody has the ability to cognitively do the work that we're talking about. And so, you know, but being able to actually recognize that it's not a symptom of our character and how and why it's showing up. Because one of the reasons it shows up is to protect us because we've depleted our brain battery because we're getting beat up in those ways, you know?
And just to emphasize what you said earlier, it's remembering that as a TBI survivor, my brain is like, think of it as a computer, and that computer is malfunctioning. So the same thing, my brain is my operating system for my body. And I first have to decipher the information that's coming in, and there could be a disconnect there. Then I have to be able to process that information in my brain. There could be another disconnect there. And then I also go into feeling that emotion, and there could be another disconnect there. So there's so many different processes in just one event or one thing that happens, that as you age and you become an adult, you take those things for granted because you've had all these years to practice this. Well, now we're having to relearn it with a broken CPU.
Our processor is broken.
Yes.
And not only are we having to learn it with a broken CPU, we are getting more information than we've ever had in our entire life. Like a radio antenna being amped up because we absorb frequencies and we got amped up 100 times. And now we're absorbing more and more, and we're more sensitive. And that's the oversensitivities, the overstimulations. And we have less capacity to process.
Yes.
And so it makes us feel a lot of different ways. Trapped is one of them. And when a pit bull gets backed into a corner, how does it respond? And so whether we might be in a situation where we might look trapped to the real world, yeah, well, we're feeling that anyways because we can't process all the information that's coming.
I had this conversation with my daughter because there was a long time where I would get irritated very easily in conversations. And my daughter was in high school when my brain injury happened. My daughter and my son were in high school. And there are times when it's like they just pushed a button and I would respond. And the response wasn't planned. It was
React.
I react.
Not
Thank
respond.
you. React.
I always need to just, okay, go on.
I couldn't find the word.
Yeah.
So I react. And I would react to it and I would be irritated or, and it could just be that the conversation was too long or they were saying it too fast or there's so many reasons that cause that reaction. And I told her the thing is that my body was in fight or flight mode. And when that happened, the only the only skill I had, or the only way that I knew that my brain could handle that was just to say, too much. But I wasn't even able to say it was too much. I would just respond in maybe angry, maybe irritable, maybe I would just walk in my room and shut the door and cry because I've done that too. And it was a simple conversation. But for me in that moment, it was just so much stimulation.
And I want to say, as we're getting close to the end of the episode, is we all need to give ourselves permission to respond or react how the best we can. We're doing the best we can, and it's a situation that I'm lacking the word, but it's a situation that nobody can plan for. There is no book on it, and that, like, nobody knows what to do. It's the giant question mark. And so that's why we've got to have these conversations, these healing conversations, where we're providing perspective about real experience that has never really been able to be articulated in these ways. And it needs to get to the medical professionals, and it needs to get out there to the rest of society, because brain injury is everywhere. Whether you recognize that you've had a brain injury because you dismissed it as a younger child because that's what society said, or that you have somebody you love that has a brain. So I feel that we've given you a whole lot of beautiful information today, everybody. So I feel like, one more thing I want to say is we talk about a lot of the emotions, and that the positive emotions do show up in times. And that when they do, that we give ourselves the permission to feel those too. Because I think that there was a point in time for me when brain injury really got me in so depressed of a mode that I wouldn't give myself permission to feel anything positive, because the trauma aspect was that I didn't feel like I deserved it or I was worthy of it, that I was such a burden and such a challenge and hardship on everybody else, that why would I be able to experience joy? And it was almost like I felt like I was being punished.
Also remembering that part of the brain can also be damaged. So I just got my QEEG this year, 6 years later.
That's true.
And on it came inability to feel happiness because that part of my brain is still healing.
And that's why it's important to recognize that negative emotions and negative thoughts are symptoms of traumatic brain injury. And they too are not character. They are not something that we can just think ourselves through either. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't become intentional and rewire our brains and practice working on engaging inside of our heads.
Learning to manage them.
All of the different ways. We have to travel the processes to learn them and take each step. But that does mean that it still is a symptom and it's not a part of our character. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of TBI Butterflies Healing Conversations. I'm Lolly.
Thank you. This is Faith.
And we are grateful to be able to share our journeys as we have gone through years. At this point, I'm 7.5 years, and she's a year behind me, so about 6.5 years. And that is years of lived experiences, of trauma therapies, and just doing the hard work so we could show up for ourselves, accept ourselves, so that we can show up for you and accept you. Be well, my friends. Have a wonderful day.
Be well.